which lasted for more than 30 years. Vietnam is a small country with underdeveloped economy. Our army is very poorly equipped, but our nations have a culture of thousands of years. And we have a traditional will of fighting against foreign dominations, no matter whom they are, how powerful they are, in order to defend our own sovereignty. So once again, when our homeland was threatened, we motivate all the people, the entire people, to stand up, to take up arms, to fight against foreign dominations. And all our people are so creative, and they applied all the strategies that we have drawn from the experience of the long histories of defending our country. So this is the strategy of the entire people. And then we won the war.
As you reflect on this anniversary, if you had the opportunity to speak to General William Westmoreland, your American counterpart in the war, what would you say to him?
I don't think that this question is envisaged. Thưa Ngài, bác nghĩ nếu như mà nói với ông... If I had the opportunity to tell him, I would say that our nation is a nation which possesses a long tradition of culture, and we are strongly determined to fight, and we are ready to fight no matter what the other army might be. And I think that the equipment does not make any sense, because it's the people which does make sense.
What are your feelings about the need for reconciliation and reunification with the United States?
I think that between the people of the United States and the people of Vietnam, there exists no enmity, no hatred. The two people are both peace-loving people, and they would like to have friendships. Though there's no questions of reconciliation here. 20 years have elapsed since the end of the war. Those who are responsible for the war should give a hand to cooperate, to remove all the unjustified obstacles which impede the resumptions of the full diplomatic relations, and contribute to help Vietnam to overcome all the severe consequences left over by the war. We should look forward to the future in order to build a new type of friendship between our two people, particularly between the younger generations of the United States and that of Vietnam. I also would like to take this opportunity to convey my warmest greeting of friendship to the people of America.
People on both sides in that war suffered very greatly, and I'm wondering, did you personally suffer the loss of family members?
Yes, I do. But here at this moment, I think of the losses, of the suffering of my entire people.
General Giap, we thank you very much for joining us on this Vietnam special.
This is Tom Intier live in Ho Chi Minh City. The picture you're seeing is Reunification Hall. 20 years ago, it was the South Vietnamese presidential palace. It is a scene of celebration yesterday, 20 years since the end of the war. For most of the people, the war is over, but there are a lot of people that are still suffering, especially the families, those without answers, those who lost a father or a son or a brother here in Vietnam and haven't been able to recover their remains yet. These are the families of the MIAs, and there are still people who hold out the hope that there are POWs still alive here in Vietnam, something they have not been able to prove. But for all of those families, the war is not yet over.
These children live in Dong Ha, just south of the old demilitarized zone. They study hard, but in a building with no windows, no electricity. That will change, partly because of this man, Louis.
This is Vietnam's final battlefield. In this muddy rice paddy between Hanoi and Haiphong, there are more questions than answers. In 1967, a U.S. Navy F-4 jet fighter with 2 crew members aboard went down here after a bombing run. The 2 American aviators joined a growing list of those identified as missing in action, or MIA. Today, 20 years after the Vietnam War, there are 2,206 Americans still listed as missing in action, 1,621 in Vietnam, 500 in Laos, 77 in Cambodia, and 8 in China.
I think that it legitimately is a searing scar. If you're the brother or the son or daughter of somebody who disappeared, or the parent, and there isn't a sufficient answer for what happened, and there's legitimate questions about what might have happened, how do you put that to bed?
Making it even more difficult is the lingering question of POWs. After the signing of the Paris Peace Treaty in 1973, Vietnam released American prisoners of war. But some people still accuse the Vietnamese of holding POWs at secret prisons. Senator Kerry, during his many visits back to Vietnam, has been to several locations where Americans were supposedly being held. None were found. Former U.S. Congressman Bill Hendon is not convinced. He claims Americans are still being held in Vietnam.
We have acquired irrefutable information about American prisoners of war alive right now in captivity, held by the Vietnamese government in Vietnam.
Vietnamese government officials deny Hendon's claim.
And we have conducted a lot of investigation on this issue, and we found nothing.
One of the longest-held American POWs, U.S. Senator John McCain, served on the congressional committee that investigated the POW MIA issue.
After a year of investigation and hearings, we reached the conclusion that there was no, and I quote exactly, no compelling evidence that Americans are alive in Southeast Asia. I believe that that's an accurate depiction of the situation.
But the questions and the accusations will not go away. Many of those still listed as missing are pilots. The only way to remove their names from the list is by recovering remains and scientifically identifying them. In 1985, the Vietnamese returned the remains of one of the 2 missing crewmen from this crash site. A team of experts from the U.S. military are working to locate the Navy aviator still missing. Finding the pieces of the puzzle necessary to make a positive identification is not easy here in Vietnam. After 17 days of screening at this site, these are the largest pieces that were found. A piece of the fuselage, a piece of the engine, and part of the fuel tank. These men and a few women are looking for what may truly be the needle in the haystack. A small bone fragment the size of a fingertip or a tooth may provide the scientific evidence to make a positive ID.
It's a good feeling being out here, trying to repatriate guys that made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, and they gave their lives.
But this is not a one-sided issue. The Vietnamese have their own list of soldiers missing in action, much longer than the U.S. list. There are more than 300,000 still missing here. The Vietnam War was about body count on both sides. What happened after the counting was something not often made public. Vietnamese and American soldiers were often mutilated as a psychological statement. Tim O'Brien is a well-known American author. His books are about the war. They are first-hand accounts. He was there as a soldier. He feels the U.S. government has taken the MIA issue too far, demanding too much from the Vietnamese.
This whole MIA thing really bothers me, and I know bothers the Vietnamese. It is so one-sided as to be outrageous and almost cartoonish. The American narcissism on this subject, our MIAs.
Few Americans have seen the other side of the human ledger. Nguyen Xuan Yai is 73 years old. He lost his only son in the war. Nguyen Xuan Hao was just 25 when he joined the Army after college in 1971. Less than a year later, he was dead. killed by a bomb dropped from an American B-52 near Quang Chi, just south of the DMZ. Inside the house, there is a framed certificate from the government. Your son gave his life for the country. He was a hero. Nguyen Xuan Yai has spent the last 2 decades looking for his son's remains, depleting his entire life savings.
I couldn't believe my son was killed. I refused to accept it. He always came home to visit us. How could he die? It was too great a loss.
Last November, Hao was finally located. 2 other soldiers with Hao when he died managed to find the site of the grave. The body was still wrapped with the same piece of electrical cord placed around it 22 years ago. His body was returned to Hanoi for a proper burial. The Vietnam War has been over for 20 years, but for many there is no end until the missing finally come home. For each family, be they Vietnamese or American, the loss of a son, a brother, or a father is felt the same way. The Vietnam War continues to be, for many people, a very emotional thing. There is still a lot of finger pointing of blame. But for those who lost someone here in Vietnam, it will be a long time before they can accept anything. Bernie?
Tom, how much longer will the search for MIAs in Vietnam go on, and when do you think United States officials will decide that the search has gone on long enough?
It's really difficult to determine when the end will come. They are using DNA to try to identify small bone fragments about the size of your small fingertip. It is very difficult to make an identification with some of the things they are finding. They have visited all the cases at least once, but as far as putting a cap on it and saying when they will stop, they say when the last one is accounted for.
And before we leave you, a personal question. What does this anniversary trip back to Vietnam mean to Tom Mintier?
Well, I was here in 1968 and 1969, Bernie, as a combat photographer for the U.S. Army. For me, it has helped put it away, to basically let go of it. And as one pilot told me, put the new memories on top so that when you get a little older, those are the ones you look back to, and I hope that's what I can do.
We hope so too, Tom. Thank you. He was fathered by a hero and was a hero himself, but he ultimately found his life too hard to go on with. Yet, because of him, children of those he fought beside and against will have a place to learn in peace. CNN's Bruce Morton has the story of the Vietnam soldier who called himself a fortunate son.
These children live in Dong Ha, just south of the old demilitarized zone. They study hard, but in a building with no windows, no electricity. That will change, partly because of this man, Louis Puller. He was the son of the most decorated U.S. Marine ever, went to Vietnam as a Marine lieutenant, and lost both legs and part of one hand.
One more Vietnam veteran reporting, sir. I have already served my time in hell.
Puller went willingly to war, turned against it later.
I became opposed as I went through it. And then after I got back and realized the way the country was responding to its warriors, and I perceived that the leadership of the country had led us astray, and I couldn't justify the enormous sacrifice with the results that we were getting. At that point, I became very disillusioned.
Puller wrote a prize-winning autobiography, Fortunate Son. The title is from a Creedence Clearwater Revival song.
It ain't me.
I ain't no military man, the chorus goes. I ain't no fortunate son. Puller killed himself last year, but before that, he went to Vietnam and came back with an idea: build a school at Dong Ha.
Look to the 21st century to say, yes, the war is now in the history books. It is in the past. What can we do to bridge into the future? What better way than to touch the future than to touch children?
Vietnam